Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Ken Daig, 1846 21st Avenue. And first of all, I'd like to say to all of you, thank you very much for your service. It's really been very helpful. And moving forward, I'd like to ask your consideration on the following. You all know our neighborhood, Osceola, has been designated a historical area. A number of years ago, Anna Brady worked on what we call sidewalk stamps and other things of importance to our neighborhood, curbs and things of that nature. We had thought that there was a record on file where things were marked, and there is not. We have some construction going on in our neighborhood. It's commercial construction, and they had to put in a line to do a fire sprinkler system. Anyway, I was concerned about the sidewalk stamps because there is a way when they do construction, you can cut out a piece of the sidewalks, and there's specs for that to save the historical stamp. There's other things that, like the curbs, where the machinery can be notified, like the contractor, to be careful of going over the curbs, scratching the sidewalks, and things of that nature. I spoke with staff. And after I spoke with our staff, I got a hold of our city manager and ran this by the city manager as far as how can we get it on the books with the GIS marking where it's mapped. It can be done. Anna is more familiar with how these things can be done as far as what can be marked. So I'm going to ask for her help. And if you guys can talk about it and maybe come up with a policy that you can let the city manager know so we can get these things on the books and they're marked with the GIS marking. So that is my humble request, if you could help us out with that, with not only our neighborhoods but other neighborhoods. Thank you very much. If you have any questions for me, feel free to ask. I know the city manager was kind enough to come in today. I had asked him to please stop by at this meeting. If you have any questions, he'll address them for you. Thank you very much for your time.
Will you describe more about the stamps for the benefit of the board?
There are markings, sometimes like in front of our house, one of the old concrete companies that used to put down the sidewalks, they have their little mark on their symbol, their company symbol, their name, and the year. And it looks pretty cool on some of the symbols. We have one almost out in front of our house, and then right across our street on the corner, there's another mark. And we have a couple others throughout the neighborhood. There's not too many. Again, I'll defer to Mrs. Brady. She's familiar with where some of the stamps are. My concern is just to get it on the books, because the way it was explained to me, once it's on the books, when construction takes place, the city already has it on the books. They take a look at it and say, okay, we have these things here, and then they can let the contractors know. Thank you. Anything else?
They haven't started construction yet?
Excuse me?
They haven't started demoing the sidewalk yet?
Yes, the sidewalk has been pulled up. Because there was no reason to put a stop, to the construction work. The construction people didn't know because there's nothing on file, and that's how it was explained to me. They said, hey, if we had this stuff on file, it's basically a no-brainer. It comes in on the site plan. The folks that review it here at the city side of the house, they see that, and they let the contractors know.
The stamps are gone now?
I'm not sure if we had any stamps there or not. That's something we have to look at later on down the road if some stamps were removed. I went over and took a look at some of the concrete slabs that they already pulled up. Some of them were quite large, so I couldn't move them off the little pieces, so we're not quite sure. I did put into the Public Works Director, Mr. Falls, I had asked if they could notify the contractors out there to please be careful of the curbs with their machinery, and also take a little special care of the sidewalks that they still left in place that are old. Please be careful. You know how when you run big equipment over, or shovels and whatnot, you scrape them. And once they're scraped, they look kind of sloppy later on down the road for the neighborhood. And what we're trying to do, and I'll just speak for our neighborhood, is try to hold on to what we have as what we consider our infrastructure. A lot of the older stuff is important to us. It's in good shape, and it helped us get our designation. You all know we have our marker out there that sits on the corner of 20th and 19th, and that's real special to us. I think we're the only neighborhood in the city that has that type of marker. And I'll sit down unless there's other questions.
Okay. Thank you. Do I need to close the public comment before we can have discussion? Okay. Seeing no one else, the city manager, did you have any comments on?
Madam Chair, the only thing from the city, and I think that Monty Falls has been in touch with Ken Degg on this on several occasions, we would rely on other people to find the stamps. We're not going to put a team of people into the field to go look for stamps. So it would be those that would give it to us. And I believe the request is once those have been identified, we put them on the GIS, which we don't have any problem with.
And then how would the process be? This might be a question for Tim. How would that process work through site plans and
Well, you
various
got to
projects
remember
that go on?
most of these are going to be in the right of way, so they have to get a right of way permit. So if it's on the GIS, the engineering group, they'll handle that, or water and sewer, whoever has to put the line through. Okay, so it should be fine. I think it's a better way than we have now. That we're not. I take it you had the inventory, or you do have the survey. You don't.
No.
Okay.
So we'll close. We'll close public comment and have some discussion on this. Does anyone have any comments?
How many stamps are we talking about? Are they like
Okay.
2 per street, or how many are there?
So the history from my perspective is there's probably a handful of them. And from my perspective, how it happened for me is I saw the city doing work, about 10 years ago. We had another city manager here at the time, and there was some communication about them and real notification about the historic significance of these stamps. They're from the 1920s when the concrete sidewalks were poured. And it was my understanding that there was a process in place to identify those. So now it's coming to light that there isn't a process to identify those. And if staff is saying, typically a local historic district would help provide a regulation for us to be notified of any work going on, even if it's a city in that district. But since we don't have that, I hear staff saying that there is an internal process they could put in place to help mitigate any damage to those stamps. What I don't hear staff saying is that they can't go out and do the inventory. So perhaps there'll have to be a group of volunteers from the neighborhood that could go out and do that and provide that documentation to the city. I do feel like that is a role that city staff needs to start working towards, though, however. Or I see Tim's face, but that's my.
Is it okay?
I'll stay with that.
Would information from volunteers, neighborhood volunteers, would that be enough for the city to include those? Okay. Not Tim?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Only thing we would need is if, for example, Anna walks out of her house and there's a stamp in the front, she just gives us a call. We would go out and check and say, okay, there is a stamp, and we would put that in our GIS. We just don't have enough personnel to walk up and down the streets.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
I
I
understand
guess
that.
maybe that's the issue here. I'm thinking of this 3-block area, just the Osceola Park
Right.
subdivision,
There's only
which is
3
a 3
streets.
Yeah, so that's why it's not. But I think in this case, being from the neighborhood, I think there's some volunteers who could go out and help document it.
Yeah, only thing we need is a list of the general location and.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're going to have to run a GPS on that, to get the exact location for GIS. So.
Right, and I don't know if you guys have handhelds here where you can go out and easily go
I believe we have something like that.
and that's
Yeah.
so.
We do for
easy.
meter reading. I'm not
Yeah.
sure about.
I don't know.
I don't know.
But
about,
they can take care of it. They'll have to go out on the site. They'll.
Yeah.
Okay. Once they know where the general location is.
Yeah.
Great.
Chairman,
Is there any more discussion?
I was wondering if we could talk about later local historic district. That's been brought up quite a bit with the CLG and other discussions. And
Well, do we want to move on to old business first?
I
and
was
have that
wherever
come
you
up?
want to put it.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, we'll move on to old business. Is there any old?
Just to follow up on, again, my conversation with Ken earlier, he wanted to make sure there was a record for this, so maybe you could put it on if you're going to meet monthly or whenever your next meeting is, to say that this is something you want to do, is to start following that inventory of the stamps. Then therefore we could start the process that, giving phone calls and that kind of stuff.
We need a trigger, right, for this inventory. So
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're ready to do it, but I think what Ken and correct me if I'm wrong, he was looking for something that went on record that the commission wanted this to happen, that we were going to start keeping this inventory and that we were going to put it on GIS.
Okay, so we need some kind of motion that there will be.
And,
that this-
it's not on the agenda, so making the motion may be a challenge right now. Tammy, what do you?
Yeah, I would suggest that we put it back on the agenda for your next meeting,
Okay.
and then discuss it, and a motion can be made at that time, and then it'll be on record. But your discussion that took place today will be in the minutes.
Okay, and it's from the discussion, staff will work with Ken Daig or someone from the neighborhood to coordinate going forward the
Yeah,
inventory.
if anyone calls us and they have located a stamp, we will check it out. And I presume you're saying it's 2 or 3 blocks. I mean, we have other historical neighborhoods. I presume there could be stamps in other locations.
There could be. There
Yeah.
are a few. I saw in Original Town, but not many. There are a few, but I would say probably for Osceola Park, they should work together and get a comprehensive inventory list, whether they are on site with someone from city staff too and do that together, or whether they do it individually and submit it. We can't rely on the individual property owner necessarily. We might miss something. So I would recommend to the neighborhood that they come up with a comprehensive
Yeah,
list so they
and
don't
you-
miss.
And you all, as a group, may want to be thinking about how you want to execute that. Again, it's going to be citywide, and I understand right now you're talking about Osceola neighborhood, but the fact of the matter is, if you set this policy in place, then anywhere there could be a stamp on a sidewalk, we possibly could get a call, and we would record that.
Okay.
And so the key is that, again, we would expect that people would notify us of that, then we would respond and make sure that we had it recorded appropriately.
So there'll be a process in place amongst staff, amongst the city, and policy.
Correct.
Okay.
But it'd be primarily relied upon being reported by others.
So would it be appropriate to maybe put something, a notice in the newspaper or something? This is a community involvement thing, get people thinking about preservation. If you see a stamp, call.
Do we have an advertising budget? How would that
Even
work?
though we have it's news, it's City of Vero Beach.
I think you could start with this program of Osceola Park because they're going to need to provide some education component. Because
Right.
a lot of people, if you just put an advertisement, they're not even going to know what you're talking about.
Well, you have to
concrete
have
stamp.
a photograph of
Yeah,
one
right. That's
in
what
the
I'm saying.
paper.
Yeah, and I don't think that we have money to. I don't know the advertising. I think a newsletter story and
Not
stuff like
advertising.
that.
Get somebody to write an
Well, that's
article
what I mean.
about
Yeah.
it.
An article in the
article.
paper.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
all.
get somebody to write an article. You don't need to
Article in the
spend money to
paper.
do that.
Yeah, it's free.
Well, not for a photo, but
They won't run a photo
for free.
in the paper?
As an
I don't
article?
know. Maybe the cultural.
As an
course.
article. As somebody
Yeah.
writes an article about it as opposed to just some notification that's going to be on the back page.
Well, would anyone like to do that from this board?
I'll contact News Weekly, see if they'll do a story. They've been doing stories on Osceola Park. Perhaps
Okay.
they will.
Any further discussion? Okay, moving on to old business. Is there any old business that anyone has to discuss? Seeing nothing, we'll move on to, sorry, was there a big sigh? I need to pause.
No, let's move on. I'll stick it in somewhere
Okay.
else.
Seeing nothing, we'll move on to new business. Number 1 on the agenda is the Historic Recognition Program. What's this?
Yeah, Anna, I had provided the commission with some information on the Mayor's Live Oak Award that we used to do several years ago. And just to kind of give you some background on how that worked, there were 5 different categories that people could send in an application asking that somebody receive an award for these different categories. And what would happen is once we got enough applications, we always had a deadline, get the applications. There was a committee that reviewed the applications. And they determined who seemed like it was done 4 times a year. And the committee determined who would receive the Mayor's Live Oak Award for that quarter. And at that time, we had worked with Riverside Bank, who would give a $50 check to whoever won this Mayor's Live Oak Award. Along with the check, they would also receive this nice plaque, and it was given out at a city council meeting. You can pass that down if you like, Deborah. And then they also would be given a sign to put in their yard that said that they had received the Mayor's Live Oak Award. And that was kept in their yard until the next quarter when we started the process over again. But this is just kind of gives you a background of the application that we used and kind of something for y'all to go on.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Yeah, I know we did discuss having some kind of award system in our last meeting with the CLG training. I don't know if we would have it. I don't know if you're interested in having an award from the Historic Preservation Board level or at the mayoral level. As I understand it right now, there's no awards program in place, correct?
No, it's been a couple years since we've done that.
And obviously for historic preservation, we could think of a couple categories, or we could start small with just one theme. I don't know what our budget, if we would have money in the budget to, if money could be allocated.
There's not a whole lot of money in the budget.
Okay.
But I mean, the forms are easy for us to print. You know, that's not a problem. It's just whatever direction that.
Tammy,
you
what
guys
was
wanna
the
go
impetus
in.
for this before? Who developed
Actually,
it?
it was
and
when Tom White was the mayor. He thought that it would be nice for the community to get involved. And at that time, there was a lot of construction going on and renovations, so he wanted to recognize those people.
And so he is the one that promoted
He
it on an
started
annual
it,
basis.
yeah.
All right. Well, it's an
Doesn't he own
excellent idea.
TJ's Awards?
Pardon?
Doesn't he own TJ's Awards?
Yeah, but they did not do the awards.
Oh, they didn't produce this? They didn't have
No,
this
we
produced?
actually we had the awards given from Classic Awards because we didn't want any conflicts.
He was being careful.
He was very careful.
But he's award-oriented.
Yeah.
I like the idea of something coming from our commission and then presented at a city council meeting because it gets more recognition, I think.
Well,
that
it's
way.
recognition for your committee and to the people that are getting recognized.
Yeah, I always, the architect John Dean passed away this past year, and or has it been longer? Gosh. And immediately when that happened, I had that idea because he was known as the preservation architect that one of these awards could be named after him, and I think that would be meaningful. I think the question is, deciding on what awards we're going to give, like what the theme is, and developing criteria for them, which wouldn't be difficult. So if you're interested as a board in moving forward with that, I can research, the historic awards programs that other preservation boards do and bring some material for the next meeting, if you like.
It's an excellent idea, and it's common practice. It's done a lot, and it works. So yes, I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a good connection with the community.
Okay. So I guess I'll do some research and I'll put a proposal together for the board, for the commission.
We are in favor.
Okay. Are you ready to talk about the grant application process? So I can go into that. Does staff have a comment on that before we?
No, just that we will, be filling out the application for conducting the survey.
Okay, so just to bring everyone up to speed, at the Certified Local Government Training, we were reinformed that now that we have CLG status, we are eligible to apply for a grant up to $25,000 with no match. We don't have to provide any match. So since we don't have a budget, that works well. And it can be for education or a type of survey and planning grant for historic preservation. And we discussed previously about updating our survey. It's really the first step in any kind of preservation planning process. So that was an impetus to meet right away so that we could get meet as the commission right away so we could get staff moving on that application.
Once it becomes available. And I think you can already start putting the scope of work. So the question really is, do you need anything from us
to be starting to put that scope of work together, or are there any commission members that have some particular input on that survey, what you want to see surveyed? Because
Well, I was also wondering, too, when Michael was talking about adding other things to it, trying to get the most out of it. We talked about the brochures and other things, other ideas we might have that we want to tag on to that to try to get as much as we can out of the grant money. So whatever, I'd like to discuss educational ideas, if we need any money to do any more with the website or more research. The brochures we talked about, the walking tour, there were a few things. We had a few ideas that I thought we should pull together and try to get as much as we can out of it, because it seemed like, especially the fellow from Boynton Beach, and that was the other thing, I was wondering if we could invite him to come tell us how they did their process and what they got out of it. William, I believe his name was, I don't remember, but to tag on and see how far we can, how much can we, it's the first try out, and he said to make it as interesting as possible, as credible as possible. The whole idea was to really make it sound good, so we make sure we get it.
I do think we should start with what it's going to cost to get to do the survey, the basic survey. Because right now you need to look at the number of properties that were already surveyed in the 1990 survey that need to be updated, minus the Osceola Park and original town properties that are already surveyed. And then you're looking at dates of buildings from 1940 to 1965, and there's a huge inventory of those because that was that next boom period. And surveys tend to be super expensive. So that might help guide whatever else that we want to try to, maximize with this grant, because we might decide maybe we only want to concentrate on the later buildings and do an educational component or whatever. I mean, does anyone have any comments?
No, I think it's a good idea. I was also thinking that with that in mind, I wanted to look at other applications. We had talked about that too at the last meeting, to get an idea of how people filled them out, what they asked for, and how much things cost. What was it, a year ago, I guess, and give us an idea of cost.
Anna, one of the things that I read was that as a commission and as a CLG, we are required to be involved in the process. So I just wondered to what extent we would become involved in other than talking about it today and making recommendations to planning. Is there a physical involvement that we somehow...
If we did, as long as it was publicly noticed, we could individually be involved, or as a group, be involved in the survey process, yes.
Correct.
Once a consultant is hired, if that's the route that everybody, recommends, then yes, we can be involved in the survey process. But because of the sunshine, as long as it's publicly noticed.
But it's not a could, it's a must, right?
It's not a must. However, it is very beneficial to at least get citizens involved. If staff's going to lead this process with a consultant, either have the consultant work with, and the board, we could be out there helping the consultant get the community involved, because it's a real opportunity for education, really. It's another chance for us to get the word out on what does designation mean, why is your house significant, why should it be preserved.
There was a lot of conversation about community engagement, getting them excited about the project, giving them a reason to care.
Yeah, we could be involved PR-wise too, writing newsletters, and that's during the process.
The deadline for submission is April the 11th, is it? May.
Yeah.
One of the things Michael mentioned was that it would be educational to go ahead and examine the existing ones, because they've already received a bunch, and the ones from prior years that they had funded. And unfortunately, when I went online, all I got was a not available. These are not available. So I never was able to pull that information up for us to actually look at and study. And then to further that frustration, and I have already for the CLG grants for their 2015, 2016 funding year, and did he not say they had for the non-matching $105, I think, $1,000?
Total.
Yes.
Yeah, total budget.
Well, they already have requests in for that amount of money, that allocation, $302,000. And they're already weighted according
They're
to,
ranked. Right.
importance.
So there may be some next
St.
year.
Augustine is 1 and 2, and these are all pretty, they're not $1,500 requests here. We've got a $30K, a $50K, a $48. So these are already their pet projects, and by the time you get halfway through this list, the money's gone. So I'm thinking it might be better for us. I hate to wait any longer because we need this, but I'm saying it might be better for us just to spend this next year working hard at coming up with something really enticing for them. They're aware of our need, and so I would hope that just out of that understanding, they would give us special consideration. But knowing that we must begin there if we're going to do anything else.
Are you suggesting we wait to apply?
Well,
Because I will respond to that if that's what you're
so we
suggesting.
can. What I'm trying to do is weigh. If we apply this year and we don't make the cut, and I would say that it's quite possible, looking at this paper right now, can we pass this along? Would
we
that
pass
be all right?
this?
Sure. Can I
all
get a
right.
copy?
Yeah.
I'm real careful with paper now. So I think I'm wondering if it's denied this year, if we don't get the funding this year, do we start again? You submit a new one?
Yeah, you
it
submit a
doesn't
new
go
one.
into a queue
You
again.
could make changes, but from my experience, you want to go ahead and apply because when it shows that you've applied 2 or 3 times, by that third time, you do have
Okay.
a better chance. Saying,
Good.
But if you're coming, and because it's survey and because ours is over 20 years out of date, that helps. They do understand that
Good.
we need that. Whereas, you might talk to a St. Augustine where they've had numerous surveys, and they also have, there's a lot of attention to historic preservation, that community, and they'll realize here, we're really trying to get things going. We haven't had a lot of planning for preservation.
We're trying to make a fire here.
Yeah. And they'll look at
Also on this list, Deborah,
Yes.
I'm looking at what they want to do with this money, and most of everything on this list is community education. There's only 2 survey projects. I would think a survey project would take precedence. This is just my thought process.
I love
But
that
a survey
optimism.
process.
Well, it's
I
the
hope.
first thing that they look for is a survey.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is that would maybe take precedence since we're kind of neophytes here. We're the newbies, and
I only
maybe
have
that
one.
would
This
be-
is another
Really?
category.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'll pass it to
Pass
you.
it back.
Well,
So
as
maybe,
long
maybe
as
we
I
do
just
have a
wanted to make
chance,
sure
but-
that it didn't become, like an old sandwich if
No.
if they don't approve it. So if it's still good and it will help us in the following year if we don't get funding, that's great.
Definitely.
I guess it
And then
sounds-
just out of curiosity, I thought you might want to see there are tons of the small matching grants. So people are very busy in other areas. And perhaps some of those you could find online just to get the wheels turning. But
Sounds like it should boil down to what do we think that we should ask for?
well, I think Anna said we start with the basic survey and price that out.
Yeah, I was suggesting, staff can figure out the number of properties easily with the property appraiser, have the boundaries of the City of Vero Beach, reach out to the property appraiser, get the number of buildings in that. I would shoot for focusing on 41 to 65 separately keep those separate from 1940 and before that have already been done, just in case for pricing purposes. And then once we get an idea, because I've been told on the low end that some consultants charge 100 to 150 a building.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so the surveys can be very expensive.
150,000?
No, I'm sorry, $100 to $150 per building for a survey. And some communities will have volunteer groups that they'll train to help offset that cost
150 bucks?
per building. No, yeah, if you pay a consultant, that's on their low end. It's very labor intensive. Historic surveys are very labor intensive. So that's why I thought as a guideline, if we can have that by our next meeting, then we can discuss more of the parameters of this grant that Gail is going to work on the application for. And we may say, let's just focus on this specific area or this specific time period and come up with an education component too. Say this is our, talk about the priorities. If that sounds like a good plan.
That sounds like a good plan. So, step one.
So staff, that's doable by next month? Okay. All right. We don't need a motion or anything, right? No. Okay. Sorry. Moving on to number 7, Planning and Development Department matters. Do you have anything?
Nothing today.
Okay. Chairman's matters. I didn't have anything. I just mentioned that I did provide some information on historic surveys. I have some older information actually from the Certified Local Government Program that I'll share with you from time to time. I kind of pulled out my old notebooks, so it looks antiquated, but it's very valuable information, and it talks about this is where you want to start is with the survey. What is it? Who does it? So hopefully you'll find that interesting. What a Historic Preservation Commission does. I went over that. What are our responsibilities? What's our role? And that's always interesting to review to keep us on track of what we should be focused on. And then also, I'm a member of the National Alliance for Historic Preservation Commissions, so I will share those bulletins. I mentioned that at our last CLG training. I'll share those bulletins with the board every month, too, or every 2 months, I think they come out for the next year. And then maybe after that, the city can get membership. We're going to put that in our budget. Do any of the members have anything they'd like to discuss, bring up? And you had probably planned to talk about a few things today under our matters.
When we attended the CLG, we had talked about, and I had also emailed Michael previously about communicating with other CLGs. That's supposed to be an option that we can enjoy, an opportunity that we can enjoy. The benefits are obvious. If you need an answer and you're considering doing something perhaps creative, you can find out if someone else has done it better or has had, adverse experiences. And it's peculiar to me still that we can cause, an inter-city hall disturbance just sending out a casual email, and yet we could discuss specifics about local preservation practice in different cities and share that information freely. But I went ahead and consulted the planning department and consulted Michael again and said, be certain, and I think I did forward those emails to City Hall. I always do. So we can do this, and I wanted to make sure everyone here was comfortable with that, to do something similar to the national forum. Do you subscribe to that? It's expensive,
yes,
but it's wonderful.
The National Alliance?
Yeah.
I'm still
the forum with the National Trust.
Yeah, I do, and I'm actually still under my student membership.
Well, that's nice because it's expensive.
It'll end, but yeah.
But it's great because it's like having a chat board where people can sound their ideas and other people can comment, and it's very valuable. So I think it would be lovely, since every state is somewhat different, that we can maybe develop one just by being the first to reach out and do this, a Florida forum where we would just, through City Hall, through the clerk, through planning department, just give everyone an opportunity to engage each other, and we could either suggest one topic or just have people do it randomly. Or
can you be more specific what you mean? It's
just an email. Like the thing that prompted this was wanting to make sure that we were approaching our or ad valorem tax incentives, in the best way we could, in the way that would give us the most positive response from the public. And it would just be interesting to find out what kind of response other people have had in other cities and how they've structured it. And
So you would like staff to reach out to the CLGs?
no, we would do it, and then of course it channels through.
Individually, you could do that.
Apparently, yes, that was my understanding.
I'm guessing, though, you want to see
But
a way
like
to
I can't
record it,
hear
maybe?
it. You know what I'm saying? I think they're sunshine.
No, Michael said no. I will. You didn't receive those emails then.
No, I was going to ask Tammy about that. I'm guessing what you like the idea of engaging in conversation, and you'd like to see that in a forum, but I don't know that we can, since we can't share with each other, it's kind of awkward, but I understand maybe there's a way, even on our website, of sharing almost like testimonials of folks that have their experiences with what they've done, maybe. Maybe it would be a way to at least let the rest of us know what's going on, and not quite sure how to formulate it, but I know what you're trying to do. It's just how do you go about it?
You would send an email through City Hall, the same way I sent my email last night, and they would send it out. Gail or whomever would send it out to the other CLGs, and then they would post comments back, and then we would get them back in our.
From Gail.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting, is that
that's
staff would actually send the question
the same
out.
way they
Yes,
have been,
yes.
the same ongoing manner. So I thought that would be valuable and easy to do.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Is that fine with Gail?
That sounds fine.
Okay. And Michael Zimney said that he has all the contacts. I believe he has that network. So yeah, anytime we have an issue that we want to reach out to other communities, we can do that. Now, do we need to go through the city clerk's office, then to Gail?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's make sure that I have a record of it.
Okay.
So we'll make sure that Gail gets it, and once she gets her comments back, she can send them to us, and I'll make sure the commission gets them.
And then obviously, if you get bombarded at some point, just come to us and we can, provide them to you as a board or something like that to help her manage those. I don't see that happening, but
Yeah, hopefully not.
yeah,
Things are really picking up.
yeah.
But this will be all email correspondence,
No,
so.
I'm just meaning that things have really picked up.
Oh.
But you might email her. I might email her. If we each are individually, maybe it's the same topic. We may just have to filter it through the board, and then we have it as an agenda item, and we say we'd like you to reach out to this community for these issues next month or in the next 2 months if it gets unmanageable. That's all. And so, that's all.
Okay. We'll make it work.
Are there any other members who?
Well, the local historic
Other
district,
members?
how would we go about being one? I remember a lot of conversation about that it actually carries more weight than the historic. Like with Osceola Park, we have the federal national designation, but not the local. And how do we go about being more local?
I would suggest, if it's for your particular neighborhood, that you want to encourage individual homeowners to start designating their properties. I would suggest that as a first step. And then start looking at a district. If you get a handful of homeowners who have done that, and they're strategically placed throughout the National Register district boundaries, you'll have the support you need to come into the city, and you'll end up talking to Tim and Gail about then discussing to become a local historic district.
So it would be section by section.
I would just start at individual property owners that are on board. Get your support network first and get them to designate individually.
Do you find that most areas have that kind of designation, or is it a citywide?
Most areas, in my experience, cities are designating historic districts over an owner's permission, and we don't have that system here. So it has to come from, it works well when it comes from the ground up here. There's no need right now, and this is, again, my opinion, to try to create a citywide historic district language. I think in our community, you just want to focus on where the support level is right now. And then as a neighborhood wants to become a district, they could request to do so.
Do we
I
have,
think that will be the most successful approach. is what-
do we have the criteria in place or the language to start local designation?
Yes, that's what we're here to do as a board, actually. We're hoping that people are coming in to designate their buildings locally. That's
All right,
what we should be
that's
doing
excellent.
every month instead. Really,
Yeah,
that should be
instead of
part of
all
our
this
regular
other-
business. And on that, go ahead.
One of the other topics that we touched on before was approaching county about including the county portion of the taxes in the tax relief.
Yeah.
So let's not lose sight of that. Let's not forget about that as we start to refine our own plan here.
Definitely.
Once we put that in
let's-
place, we can.
And I think Tim has more information on that. Do you know what his recommendation was last in regards? Okay, we can find out for the next meeting. Maybe he can be here for those few minutes that we talk.
I believe he thought it was a great idea.
He did, and I remember he said there was something he wanted to get completed first, and I think it was the rewrite of that rehab tax credit, and that's been done,
Yes.
right? That's been approved by council,
I think so.
where we were going
was it
to
the last
widen
hearing?
the scope for who could apply for
I
the.
went to the council, but I don't know.
The contributing as well, or some? Were we going to put the contributing houses?
Yeah,
in?
National Register qualified properties were going to become eligible for that tax incentive, local tax incentive.
That was just approved at the last council meeting.
Okay, it was. All right.
No, I'm sorry. It's actually on for a public hearing on the 17th.
Okay.
It was on for first reading, so the public hearing is on the 17th.
So that'll be perfect to talk about as a next agenda item. I think staff's going to have to talk to county staff, and the county historian expressed interest in being involved with that process.
Thank you, Tammy.
Okay. If there's nothing more, I'll.
Want to schedule a meeting for next month?
We
Yes.
have one, don't we?
Yes, we do have
The
one
8th.
scheduled.
You scheduled it for April 9th at 9:30.
Okay.
Does that still work on with everyone's schedule so far?
Works for me.
Okay. Do we need a motion to adjourn or? No. Yes, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion.
Yeah. Motion by Deborah Day, seconded by Jeffrey. All right, thank you, everyone. And I will try to get better at this.